And now it's time for The Cottage Angler, brought to you by Interstate Battery.
Hey, I'm Lauren Wetzel with Navico. We manufacture Lowrance electronics. Today we're going to be out here fishing largemouth, doing something a little bit different. We're relying heavily on our electronics, fishing deep weed lines in around 20 feet of water. We're going to try big deep diving crankbaits that dive down 16 to 20 feet and even jigs out here. One of the really nice features about the GPS units now is the ability to put navionics charts in them. These are high detailed maps that will show you all the contour lines, the spot soundings, everything on the lake, all the weed beds. So what you can do is when you're struggling, you're not catching a lot of fish. In this case, we're just on a deep point, and we can go and now look at our navionics chart, maybe move up to a shoreline where there's a steep breaking contour. If we go there and start catching them, then we can start patterning that, looking on the chart for more areas like that to duplicate it. And then if you're still struggling, you're not catching them, try different areas. Look for areas that maybe have a sloping shoreline. Stuff like that on the navionics chart can really help you narrow down where you need to fish to get right back on them. Okay, so as for baits today, what we've been using mostly is these deep diving crankbaits, and a couple in particular. This one here dives to 16 feet, this one to about 14 feet. And what we're trying to accomplish is have those baits dive down and just tick the tops of the weeds, get caught up in them sometime. You've probably seen me just ripping the rod to break it free. And that's what really triggers a lot of the strikes. So just been keying in on the electronics, seeing what depth we're in, and seeing what depth those weeds top out at. So if they're topping out at 12 to 14 feet, I'll choose the one that runs about 14 feet. If they're going a little bit deeper, maybe topping out at about 15 to 18 feet, we'll run the deeper diver that'll go down that deep. Colors, pretty simple. We're just going to focus in on these colors that represent bluegill. That's pretty much what these fish are feeding on down there, and perch as well. So that's about all we're doing with these crankbaits. Another thing you can do too is plastic worms and jigs. This is a big 10-inch plastic worm, and flipping jigs as well. Just casting them out here and just swimming them back. If the bite slows down, that's a great way to put a few extra fish in the boat. Feels like a little guy. That's a start. Not too bad. Just hung up on a little weed and that guy was there. That's definitely smaller than average for out here, that's for sure. But still not a bad fish. And that fish too could be the key in telling us what we need to be doing out here. Because I don't know if you noticed, but right when I knew I had that fish on, immediately saved a waypoint on the GPS. So now I know exactly where I was when I hooked this fish, and they're schooling up out here. So hopefully we'll just get right back on that waypoint, make another cast, and see if we can get another one. All right, it's a start. Making long casts with these crankbaits is really important, because what you want to do is get that bait diving to its maximum depth. This bait I'm using here dives to about 16 feet. And I'm throwing it on a medium heavy action 7-foot rod and 10-pound test line. Now it seems like light line, but it's fluorocarbon line, so it's very abrasion resistant. Nice thing about the fluorocarbon is when it gets hung up in the weeds like that, just pop it off. There's a lot less stretch than mono, so it just pops out of the weeds really easy. And that in itself will trigger a lot of fish. Oh, no, another pike. You get them with these big crankbaits, they don't fight too much until they get right to the boat, and then they like to go. Oh, getting a little bit bigger now. That one too. We noticed just on the, just watching the GPS, just see the contour line start to turn in. So we were just going through a turn, and the weeds make a turn, and that's a lot of times where the fish will position on there. So let's see if we can get another. What I'm constantly doing here is, you'll notice, just looking down at the graph, and what I'm looking at is the edge of the weeds. I want to keep that edge, keep the boat right on the edge of those weeds, because that's where the fish are going to be positioned. So what I'll do is I'll keep the weed line just to my left, and then I'll nudge the boat to the right, just so the screen clears up and the weeds disappear. Then what I'll do is make my cast right down that line, nudge the boat back to the left, see the weeds again on the graph, and then just keep doing that constantly back and forth, and that'll keep you tracking right down that weed line. Fishing with crankbaits is a really great way to cover a lot of water. Here we're just fishing along a weed line and just fan casting along the weed line, just continually moving along it till we find some fish. Once we catch some fish, we can stop and slow down in that area. Still fish it with a crankbait for a little bit, but if the bites start to slow down, you can slow down with a worm or a jig and pick up the less active fish that are in the area. Oh, I think it's got me buried up now. Not too sure what this guy is. Another pike, it looks like. Yeah. Whoa. Yeah, that's a good pike. That's where these big ones go. Up in the spring, they're usually up shallow. Then they move out to these deep weed lines, and this is where you find them. That's a solid fish. Yeah, there we go. That's a nice one, eh? Look how chunky that fish is. Right along the edge of that weed, just like we've been doing all day. That's a good fish. That'll probably be just shy of 10 pounds or so. Nice one. That's beautiful when a plan comes together like that. Look at how thick that fish is. Whoa, he's gone. That's awesome. And that was another one. It didn't really get down to the bottom. These fish might be suspended up a little bit more. And that one is a nice largemouth. That's not a bad one. That's kind of what we came out here for. And these fish out here are just so chunky on these weed lines. There's just so much food out here. That's decent, not too bad at all.
Take a picture.
Look at the gut on that thing too. That's a good one. I'll throw that guy in the live well and get some pictures and release her a little later. The other thing too is when you're out on these deep weed lines, a lot of the times these fish are schooling out here, and you release these fish back into the school, they'll spook the school. So if you put them in the live well for a few minutes, get another cast out there real quick while the school's still active, a lot of the times you can keep them fired up and going. This spot here was the first one we started on today, and all we got in the morning was just that little small bass. Decided to come back here though, and it's always a good idea to come back and check your spots again. Check the time that you've saved your waypoints. It'll record the date and the time that you've saved them. So if you're there at 8 in the morning and you actually save that waypoint at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, maybe those fish use that spot later in the day. So check the time on your waypoints, come back to those spots around those times, and that'll really help you dial in on what time you should be on those spots.